"You're embarrassing us," my son whispered harshly, his breath hot against my ear as he pulled me aside at his promotion party. The crystal chandelier above cast dancing shadows across his face, highlighting the disgust in his eyes. "Can't you just try to fit in for once?" I looked down at my simple navy dress from Target, then at the sea of designer gowns and tailored suits surrounding us in the opulent ballroom of the Meridian Hotel. Marcus, my 28-year-old son, stood beside me in his crisp Armani suit, his face flushed with shame rather than pride at his recent promotion to senior vice president at Sterling Financial Group. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I murmured, adjusting the modest pearl necklace that had been my mother's. "I thought this was appropriate for..." "Appropriate?" Marcus cut me off, his voice barely contained. "Mom, look around. These are the most important people in finance. My colleagues, my boss, potential clients. And you show up looking like a secretary." The words stung, but I maintained my practiced smile. For 3 years, I'd perfected this role, the struggling single mother, working multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet, living in a cramped apartment across town. Marcus had no idea that the woman he was embarrassed by was actually Dr. Elena Rodriguez, founder and CEO of Apex Holdings, the private equity firm that had quietly acquired a controlling stake in Sterling Financial 6 months ago. "You know what?" Marcus continued, his voice growing more agitated. "Maybe you should just go. I'll tell people you had to leave early for work or something." I watched my son's face, seeing not the loving boy I'd raised, but the entitled man he'd become. Success at Sterling had changed him, or perhaps revealed who he'd always been underneath. The way he treated service staff, his casual dismissal of anyone he deemed beneath his status, his assumption that wealth and position made him inherently superior. It all made my chest tight with disappointment. "Of course, Marcus," I said softly. "I understand you want to make a good impression." Relief flooded his features. "Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd get it. Look, I'll call you tomorrow, okay? We can celebrate then, just the two of us." As I turned to leave, I caught sight of myself in one of the ballroom's gilded mirrors. The woman looking back was unrecognizable from the CEO who commanded boardrooms and orchestrated multi-billion-dollar deals. Gone were the designer suits, the confident posture, the aura of absolute authority. In their place was Elena Martinez, Marcus's fabricated version of his mother, complete with carefully chosen insecurities and financial struggles. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The deception had begun 3 years ago when Marcus started working at Sterling. Fresh out of his MBA, full of ambition and unfortunately a growing sense of entitlement, he'd begun to change. During family dinners, he'd started making casual comments about unsuccessful people and their obvious failings. He'd criticized service workers, mocked his former classmates who'd taken lesser jobs, and gradually developed a worldview where worth was measured solely by salary and status. I'd watched my son transform into everything I'd fought against. In the corporate world, the type of executive who crushed others to climb higher, who saw employees as expendable resources rather than human beings. When he'd announced his job at Sterling Financial, I'd made a decision that still kept me awake some nights. I would become someone else, someone he might learn to treat with basic human decency. I would teach him empathy the hard way, through a complex web of shell companies and legal maneuvering. I'd arranged for Marcus to never know my true identity. Official records showed Elena Martinez, his mother, as a part-time administrative assistant and occasional freelance translator. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, CEO of Apex Holdings, existed in a completely separate universe of corporate filings and business registrations. The irony was exquisite. Marcus worked for Sterling Financial, never knowing that his embarrassing mother effectively owned the company that paid his inflated salary. Every promotion he'd received, every bonus, every moment of professional pride, all orchestrated by the woman he'd just asked to leave his celebration. I made my way through the crowd, overhearing snippets of conversation that made my teeth clench. Marcus was already holding court near the bar, regaling his colleagues with what I could only assume were disparaging stories about his mother's limitations. "She tries, you know?" I heard him say to a group of junior executives. "But she just doesn't understand this world. Some people are built for success, others—" He shrugged, as if my supposed failures were both obvious and inevitable. Jennifer Walsh, Sterling's CFO, laughed politely. "Well, at least she raised a son who clearly inherited the right genes for business." If only she knew, I thought grimly. Jennifer was actually one of the few people at Sterling I genuinely respected. Her quarterly reports crossed my desk regularly, and her insights into market trends were consistently brilliant. She had no idea she was talking to her ultimate boss while my own son disparaged my intelligence and work ethic. I paused near the exit, watching Marcus bask in the admiration of his peers. At 28, he'd achieved a level of success that would have been impossible without the connections and opportunities I'd quietly arranged through Apex Holdings. The networking events he'd been invited to, the high-profile clients who'd specifically requested him, the mentor who'd taken him under his wing, all carefully orchestrated by proxy firms working on my behalf. "Mrs. Martinez?" I turned to find a young woman in a server's uniform, holding a tray of empty glasses. Her name tag read, Sophia, and she looked nervous. "Yes? I'm sorry to bother you, but I overheard your son talking to his friends about you, and I just wanted to say—" She paused, glancing around nervously. "You seem really nice. I'm sorry they were being mean." My heart clenched. "Thank you, Sophia. That's very kind of you to say. I work 3 jobs, too," she continued in a whisper. "It's hard, you know? But you raised a successful son, so you must be doing something right." I looked at this young woman, probably Marcus's age, working a catering job on a Friday night while my son enjoyed his promotion party. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Here was someone showing genuine kindness to a stranger, while my son treated his own mother like a liability. "You're very sweet," I told Sophia, pressing a folded 20 into her palm. "Take care of yourself." I finally left the ballroom. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Kim, my actual assistant and one of the few people who knew my double life. "How did it go? Need the car brought around?" I typed back quickly. "Walking to the corner. Pick me up there in 5 minutes." The cool October air hit my face as I stepped onto 5th Avenue. Around me, the city hummed with its usual energy. People rushing to dinner dates, tourists snapping photos, the endless dance of urban life. I pulled out my phone and opened the secure app that connected me to Apex Holdings Operations Center. "Good evening, Dr. Rodriguez," came the immediate response from Marcus Chen, our night shift operations manager. "How may I assist you?" "I need a full review of all Sterling Financial personnel files," I said quietly, walking toward the designated pickup point. "Specifically, I want detailed reports on workplace culture, employee satisfaction metrics, and any instances of discrimination or harassment in the last 18 months. Of course, should I prioritize any particular departments? Start with the executive level. Senior VPs and above. I want to know how they treat subordinates, support staff, and anyone they perceive as beneath their status." "Understood. Timeline? I want preliminary reports by Monday morning. And Marcus?" I paused. The irony of sharing a name with my son, not lost on me. "This is classified at the highest level. Distribution limited to myself and Sarah Kim only." "Acknowledged. Anything else?" I looked back at the warm glow emanating from the Meridian Hotel's windows. Somewhere inside, my son was probably still holding court. perhaps sharing more stories about his disappointing mother who couldn't afford better clothes or understand the sophisticated world he inhabited. Yes, I said finally. I want a complete analysis of Marcus Martinez's performance metrics, peer evaluations, and client feedback. Everything we have. The senior VP who was just promoted? That's the one. If Marcus wanted to be judged purely on his professional merits, without the advantages of his mother's influence, then he'd get exactly that. I'd spent 3 years protecting him from the consequences of his entitled behavior, quietly fixing problems and opening doors. But tonight had been a revelation. My son didn't just look down on people he thought were beneath him. He was actively cruel to them, including his own mother. Sarah's car pulled up to the curb, a modest Honda Civic that fit Elena Martinez's supposed financial situation. I slipped into the passenger seat, already mentally preparing for the transformation back to my real identity. Rough night? Sarah asked, studying my face in the rearview mirror as we pulled into traffic. Educational, I replied, pulling off the simple pearl necklace and reaching for the designer handbag hidden under my seat. Inside were my real phone, credit cards, and the keys to my penthouse apartment, all the accessories of Dr. Elena Rodriguez's actual life. Home or office? Office. I have work to do. As we drove through the city, I thought about the conversation I'd overheard between Marcus and his colleagues. The casual cruelty, the assumption that people's worth could be measured by their bank accounts, the complete lack of empathy for anyone struggling financially. These weren't just personal failings. They were indicative of a toxic corporate culture that I, as CEO of the parent company, had a responsibility to address. But first, I needed to understand exactly how deep the rot went, and I needed to decide what kind of lesson my son was about to learn about the real world and the real cost of treating people as disposable. The car turned onto the street where Apex Holdings maintained its discreet headquarters. Unlike the flashy Sterling Financial building with its marble lobby and corporate art, our offices were deliberately understated. Most people walking past wouldn't even notice the small brass plaque that identified the building's most powerful tenant. Dr. Rodriguez? Sarah's voice brought me back to the present. Are you sure you want to do this tonight? Maybe it would be better to wait until you've had time to process what happened. I looked at my reflection in the window, seeing the transformation that had occurred during our drive. The modest Elena Martinez was gone, replaced by the woman who'd built a financial empire through careful strategy and unwavering determination. The woman Marcus had never met, never would meet, until the moment I decided he was ready to face the consequences of his choices. No, I said firmly, gathering my real identity around me like armor. Tonight we start gathering intelligence. By Monday, I want to know everything about how Sterling Financial really operates, and then we'll see if my son's promotion was truly based on merit, or if it's time for some management changes. The car pulled up to our building, and I stepped out into the night air. No longer the embarrassing mother, but the CEO who was about to conduct a very thorough audit of her son's workplace and his character. After all, Marcus had spent the evening telling his colleagues that some people were built for success while others were destined to fail. It was time to find out which category he truly belonged in, without his mother's invisible hand guiding his career from the shadows. The Apex Holdings building hummed with quiet efficiency even at 11 p.m. on a Friday night. As I rode the private elevator to the 42nd floor, I shed the last vestiges of Elena Martinez's timid demeanor. The woman who stepped into my corner office was Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Harvard MBA, former Goldman Sachs partner, and the architect of a financial empire that most people never knew existed. My office reflected this duality perfectly. During the Adabindabur day, it was the command center for a multi-billion-dollar operation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of Manhattan's skyline, while 3 monitors displayed real-time market data from around the globe. But tonight, under the soft glow of my desk lamp, it felt more like a war room. Sarah had beaten me to the office and was already pulling files from our secure database. "I've got Marcus Chen working on the Sterling analysis," she reported without looking up. "He should have preliminary data within the hour." I sat down at my desk, powering up the encrypted workstation that contained some of Wall Street's most sensitive information. "What do we know about Sterling's executive culture from our acquisition due diligence?" Sarah handed me a thick folder. The surface-level assessment was clean. Standard corporate hierarchy, acceptable performance metrics, no major red flags. In HR complaints, but... She paused, pulling out a secondary file. "Our behavioral analysis team noted some concerning patterns in informal power structures." I opened the file, scanning the psychological profiles our consultants had compiled during the acquisition process. The analysis was thorough. Too thorough for Marcus's comfort, had he known about it. Every executive at Sterling had been quietly evaluated, their leadership styles categorized, their impact on subordinates measured. "Here," Sarah pointed to a section highlighted in yellow. "Dr. Patricia Vance, our organizational psychologist, flagged what she called toxic masculinity patterns. In the senior VP tier, quote, several executives display concerning attitudes toward perceived social inferiors, with particular disdain for service workers, administrative staff, and anyone from lower socioeconomic backgrounds." My blood ran cold as I continued reading. The report specifically mentioned hazing-like behavior toward new employees and a culture where cruelty is disguised as humor. Marcus's name appeared in 3 separate incident reports, all dismissed by senior management as personality, conflicts, or adjustment issues. "How did this not trigger intervention protocols?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. "Because technically, nothing rose to the level of legal liability," Sarah replied grimly. "No sexual harassment, no discriminatory hiring practices, no fraud. Just garden-variety workplace bullying that HR could plausibly categorize as management. Style differences." I pulled up Sterling's organizational chart on my computer. Marcus's position was highlighted in blue, Senior Vice President, Corporate Development. His team consisted of 12 direct reports, ranging from junior analysts, fresh out of college, to experienced associates hoping for their own promotions. I want individual interviews with every person on Marcus's team, I decided. Schedule them for next week, but don't go through Sterling's HR. Use our external consulting division. Make it look like a routine employee satisfaction survey for the acquisition integration. My phone buzzed with an incoming secure message from Marcus Chen in operations. "Initial Sterling data package ready for review. Sending to your secure terminal now." The files that populated my screen painted a disturbing picture. Sterling Financial's employee satisfaction scores were among the lowest in the industry, particularly in departments managed by the senior VP tier. Turnover rates were astronomical, 45% annually in junior positions, compared to an industry average of 18%. But the most damning information was in the exit interview summaries. Page after page of departing employees cited hostile work environment, management intimidation, and lack of professional respect. Many specifically mentioned feeling targeted for their backgrounds, accents, or perceived social status. "Sarah," I called out, my voice tight with controlled anger, "pull up every exit interview from Marcus's department in the last year." She worked quickly, her fingers flying across her keyboard. 12 departures in 18 months. That's a 67% turnover rate in his specific team. The first exit interview made my stomach churn. Jennifer Park, a brilliant analyst with a master's from Columbia, had lasted exactly 4 months on Marcus's team. Her departure interview was a catalog of microaggressions and deliberate humiliation. "Mr. Martinez consistently questioned my analytical methods," Jennifer had told HR, often in front of clients and colleagues. When I tried to explain my reasoning, he would interrupt with comments about foreign approaches to American business, or suggest I might be more comfortable at smaller, less prestigious firms. I scrolled through more interviews, each one revealing a pattern of systematic cruelty. Marcus and his circle had created an environment where intelligence was second to pedigree, where capability mattered less than cultural conformity, and where anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of success was slowly driven out. The irony was sickening. My son, whose own success had been carefully orchestrated by his mother's influence, was actively destroying the careers of people who'd earned their positions through pure merit. "There's more," Sarah said quietly, pulling up another file. I cross-referenced the departures with current employment data. 60% of the people who left Marcus's team are now working at companies where they've been promoted within 6 months. These weren't problem employees. They were talented people fleeing a toxic environment. I stood up, pacing to the window that offered a view of Sterling Financial's building 12 blocks away. Somewhere in that glass tower, security guards were probably making their midnight rounds, unaware that the building's ultimate owner was planning a complete restructuring of its management hierarchy. My secure phone rang, displaying Marcus Chen's extension. "Dr. Rodriguez, I have additional information you should see immediately." "Send it over." Within minutes, my screen filled with financial records that made my hands shake with fury. Marcus hadn't just been cruel to his subordinates, he'd been stealing credit for their work. Project reports showed a consistent pattern. Innovative strategies developed by junior team members were presented to clients under Marcus's name, while the actual creators were relegated to footnotes or excluded entirely. The Hartwell Industries deal, which had earned Marcus a $50,000 bonus and significant recognition, had actually been conceived and executed by David Kim, a junior analyst who'd left the company 2 months later. The acquisition strategy for Meridian Properties, Marcus's supposed breakthrough achievement, had been developed by Maria Santos, who'd quit after being told her ideas lacked strategic sophistication. "He's not just incompetent," I said aloud, my voice echoing in the empty office. "He's a parasite." Sarah looked up from her own research. "There's something else." I pulled the client feedback reports that don't go through Sterling's standard channels, the ones from our direct portfolio company relationships. She handed me a folder that made everything clear. Client after client had specifically requested to work with other Sterling executives after initial meetings with Marcus. The feedback was consistent: arrogant, dismissive, unprepared, and surprisingly, lacking in strategic insight for someone at his level. Harrison Blackstone from Meridian Corp said it best, Sarah read from her notes. "Martinez seems to mistake volume for intelligence and condescension for confidence. We've had better strategic conversations with his junior analysts." I sat back down, staring at the mountain of evidence spread across my desk. For 3 years, I'd protected Marcus from the consequences of his behavior, quietly fixing problems and ensuring his continued success. I'd told myself I was teaching him humility by maintaining my cover as his struggling mother. Instead, I'd enabled him to become everything I despised in corporate leadership. "Dr. Rodriguez?" Sarah's voice was carefully neutral. "What's our next move?" I looked at my watch. 12:47 a.m. In less than 12 hours, Marcus would wake up in his expensive apartment, the one he could afford because of the salary and bonuses from a job he'd never truly earned, and probably spend his Saturday morning telling friends about his embarrassing mother who'd had to leave his promotion party early. "Schedule a board meeting for Monday at 9 a.m., I said finally. "Full Sterling financial integration review. I want every executive's performance data, every department's metrics, and a complete cultural assessment." "And Marcus?" I pulled up his personnel file one more time, studying the photo of my son in his corporate headshot. He looked confident, successful, completely unaware that his career was built on a foundation of lies and maternal protection. "Marcus gets exactly what he's always claimed to want," I replied, "to be judged purely on his own merits, without any help from his embarrassing mother." Sarah nodded, already making notes. I'll prepare the documentation. How much should the board know about your personal relationship to Marcus Martinez? Nothing, for now. This needs to be handled as a standard post-acquisition review. The fact that I'm evaluating my own son's performance is irrelevant to his professional failures. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. This was deeply personal. Marcus hadn't just failed as an executive, he'd failed as a human being. The values I'd tried to instill in him, the empathy I'd hoped to model, the basic decency I'd assumed would eventually emerge, none of it had taken root. Instead, I'd raised a man who took credit for others' work, who crushed subordinates for sport, and who was so thoroughly convinced of his own superiority that he felt comfortable humiliating his own mother at a professional gathering. My phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. "Thanks for being understanding tonight, Mom. I'll make it up to you this weekend. Maybe we can grab dinner at that place you like, the one with the affordable menu." I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the last vestiges of maternal protectiveness crumble away. Even his apology was condescending, filled with casual reminders of my supposed financial limitations and his generous willingness to accommodate them. I typed back, "Of course, sweetheart. I'm proud of how successful you've become." It wasn't entirely a lie. I was proud of his success. After all, I'd orchestrated most of it. But I was also about to teach him that success built on cruelty and deception was more fragile than he imagined. "Sarah," I called out as she prepared to leave for the night. "One more thing. I want a comprehensive review of every person Marcus has driven out of Sterling Financial. Names, current positions, contact information, and performance records." "Planning to make some calls?" "Planning to make some offers," I corrected. Good people shouldn't suffer because my son lacks character. As Sarah gathered her files and headed for the elevator, I remained at my desk, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Jennifer Park was probably working late at her new job, grateful to have escaped Marcus's toxic management. David Kim was likely developing innovative strategies for a company that actually valued his contributions. Maria Santos was building a career where her intelligence was respected rather than stolen, and Marcus was sleeping peacefully in his luxury apartment, secure in the knowledge that his mother was safely contained in her small world of modest apartments and department store clothes, unable to threaten the sophisticated environment he'd built around himself. By Monday morning, that comfortable delusion would begin to crumble. The son who'd spent years mocking other people's limitations was about to discover his own. And the mother he'd dismissed as an embarrassment was about to reveal herself as the architect of his comeuppance. After all, Marcus had always said that some people were built for success, while others were destined to fail. It was time to find out which category he truly belonged in when the safety net of maternal protection was finally removed. I pulled up Sterling Financial's organizational chart one final time, studying the web of relationships and power structures my son had tried to navigate. Tomorrow I would begin the careful process of dismantling everything he'd built on the foundation of others' suffering. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of grief for the son I'd thought I was raising, and the icy man he'd chosen to become instead. Monday morning arrived with the crisp efficiency I'd come to expect from Apex Holdings. The boardroom on the 44th floor was already prepared when I arrived at 8:30 a.m., with leather portfolios positioned precisely at each seat and the presentation screens calibrated for maximum impact. Today would mark the beginning of Marcus's reckoning, though he wouldn't know it for several more hours. The board members filtered in one by one, 8 of the most influential figures in private equity and corporate governance. Each had been briefed on the Sterling Financial acquisition, but none knew the personal stakes involved in today's cultural assessment. To them, this was simply another post-acquisition review, standard procedure for a company with concerning employee satisfaction metrics. "Good morning, everyone," I began as the last member took their seat. Today, we're conducting a comprehensive review of Sterling Financial's operational culture. What you're about to see may surprise you. Dr. Patricia Vance, our organizational psychologist, took the podium first. Her presentation was methodical and devastating, laying out the patterns of workplace toxicity we'd uncovered over the weekend. Slide after slide showed turnover rates, exit interview summaries, and productivity metrics that painted Sterling's senior management as fundamentally broken. The data suggests a systematic problem with leadership accountability, Dr. Vance explained, clicking to a chart showing Marcus's department. This particular division has lost 12 employees in 18 months, with 89% citing management, hostility as their primary reason for leaving. Board member Catherine Walsh raised her hand. Do we have specific examples of this hostility? I nodded to Sarah, who distributed copies of sanitized exit interviews, names redacted, but content preserved. The room fell silent as 8 seasoned executives read testimonials of workplace cruelty that would have been shocking in any era, let alone today's supposedly enlightened corporate environment. Jesus, muttered Robert Chen, our longest-serving board member. This reads like a textbook case of hostile workplace environment. How did Sterling's HR department not intervene? Because technically, nothing crossed the line into legally actionable territory, Dr. Vance replied. These managers were very careful to keep their behavior just below the threshold that would trigger lawsuits. But the psychological impact on employees was devastating. I watched the board members process this information, seeing their expressions shift from routine concern to genuine alarm. These weren't just employment statistics. They were human beings whose careers had been deliberately destroyed by executives who viewed cruelty as a management tool. The financial impact is equally concerning, I added, pulling up productivity charts. Departments with high turnover show consistently declining performance metrics. Client satisfaction scores correlate directly with employee satisfaction. We're not just looking at moral failures, we're looking at business failures. Thomas Reed, our newest board member, leaned forward. What's our legal exposure here? If these patterns are documented, we could face significant liability as the parent company. Sarah fielded this question smoothly. Our legal team has identified 17 potential wrongful termination cases plus class action exposure for systematic discrimination. Conservative estimates put our liability at $15 to $20 million, not counting reputational damage. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. $20 million was a manageable loss for a company of our size, but the precedent it would set across our portfolio companies was unacceptable. More importantly, it reinforced my argument that Sterling's senior management represented an unacceptable risk to our investment. I want specific recommendations, I announced, pulling the conversation back to practical solutions. Who stays, who goes, and what structural changes we need to prevent this culture from regenerating. Dr. Vance advanced to her next slide, showing detailed performance evaluations for each Sterling executive. Marcus's profile appeared on screen, his photo projected larger than life for the entire board to examine. Marcus Martinez, Senior Vice. President of Corporate Development, she began, consulting her notes. Appointed to his current position 8 months ago, following what appeared to be exceptional performance in client acquisition and strategic planning. I held my breath, waiting for the assessment that would determine my son's fate. However, deeper analysis reveals significant discrepancies between his reported achievements and actual contributions. The Hartwell Industries acquisition, which earned Mr. Martinez a $50,000 performance bonus, was actually conceived and executed by his subordinate, David Kim. The Meridian property strategy, cited in his promotion justification, originated with Maria Santos, who left the company 2 months after her ideas were implemented under Martinez's name. The board members were taking notes now, their expressions growing grimmer with each revelation. Catherine Walsh shook her head in disgust. So he's not just toxic, he's a fraud. The pattern extends beyond simple credit theft. Dr. Vance continued. Client feedback consistently rates Martinez as unprepared, condescending, and lacking strategic insight. Several major accounts have specifically requested alternative representatives after meetings with him. I forced myself to maintain professional composure, while watching my son's reputation systematically destroyed by facts he'd probably never imagined could be compiled against him. Every slide reinforced what I'd discovered over the weekend. Marcus wasn't just a failed leader. He was actively damaging the company's relationships and reputation. "What about his direct reports?" asked Robert Chen. "Are they complicit in this behavior, or are they victims?" Sarah took over, pulling up organizational charts that showed the devastating impact of Marcus's management style. His current team of 12 includes 8 employees hired within the last 6 months, all replacements for people who left due to hostile working conditions. Productivity has declined 23% during his tenure, while client complaints have increased 47%. The numbers were damning, but the human stories were worse. As Sarah read excerpts from exit interviews, I watched the board members' faces reflect my own horror at what Marcus had become. These weren't just professional failures, they were moral failures that struck at the heart of everything I'd tried to build at Apex Holdings. "I've heard enough," Catherine Walsh announced suddenly. "This Martinez character needs to go, along with anyone else perpetuating this toxic culture. We can't afford to have our reputation associated with this kind of behavior." Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness as the board reached the same conclusion I'd arrived at over the weekend. Marcus had earned his termination through his own actions, but it still hurt to watch my son's career collapse under the weight of evidence I'd helped compile. "There's one more factor to consider," I said carefully. "The cultural rehabilitation of Sterling Financial will require more than just personnel changes. We need to demonstrate that excellent employees who were driven away will be welcomed back, and that the company values genuine talent over political maneuvering." Thomas Reed nodded. "A rehabilitation program. Interesting approach. Do we have candidates in mind?" I smiled, pulling up the file Sarah and I had prepared over the weekend. 17 former Sterling employees who left due to the toxic culture are currently employed at our competitor firms. All have demonstrated exceptional performance in their new roles. I propose we make them an offer they can't refuse. The next hour was spent developing a comprehensive plan for Sterling's transformation. Marcus and 4 other senior executives would be terminated for cause, their positions filled by a combination of external hires and returning employees who'd fled the toxic environment. The rehabilitation program would send a clear message to the industry. Apex Holdings valued character as much as competence. "When do we implement?" asked Robert Chen as the meeting drew to a close. "This afternoon," I replied. "I'll personally oversee the terminations and communicate our new standards to the remaining staff. This cultural poison needs to be extracted immediately." As the board members filed out, discussing implementation details and legal strategies, I remained seated, staring at Marcus's photo still displayed on the presentation screen. In 6 hours, I would walk into Sterling Financial's offices and personally terminate my own son's employment. He would never know that his embarrassing mother was actually the architect of his downfall. Sarah approached my chair, tablet in hand. "The termination meetings are scheduled for 2 p.m. Security has been briefed, and legal has prepared all the documentation. Are you ready for this?" I thought about Friday night's humiliation, about the exit interviews documenting Marcus's cruelty, about the talented employees whose careers he'd destroyed for sport. Most of all, I thought about the values I'd tried to instill in my son and the man he'd chosen to become instead. "Yes," I said finally. "Schedule a staff meeting for 4 p.m. I want to address the entire Sterling team about our new direction. And Marcus's personal belongings?" I considered this carefully. As his mother, I wanted to spare him unnecessary humiliation. As the CEO of his parent company, I had a responsibility to treat him exactly like any other terminated employee. Standard. Protocol, I decided. His personal items will be packed and ready for pickup by end of business today. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Great weekend, Mom. Lunch this week? I want to tell you about some big changes coming at work. I stared at the message, wondering what big changes he thought were coming. Perhaps he was anticipating another promotion, or maybe planning to push out more subordinates who threatened his carefully constructed facade. He certainly wasn't expecting to be unemployed by dinner time. I typed back, "Of course, sweetheart. I'd love to hear about your work." It wasn't technically a lie. I was definitely going to hear about his work. Specifically, I was going to hear him try to explain why his performance metrics were so consistently poor, and why so many talented employees had fled his management. "Dr. Rodriguez?" Sarah's voice interrupted my thoughts. "There's something else. Jennifer Park, the Columbia graduate who left Marcus's team, she's agreed to meet with us this afternoon. She's very interested in returning to Sterling under new management." I smiled, remembering the brilliant analysis I'd read in Jennifer's exit interview. She'd identified strategic opportunities that Marcus had dismissed, then watched him take credit for dumbed-down versions of her ideas. Having her back would send exactly the right message about Sterling's new priorities. Perfect. Schedule her. Interview for 3 p.m., right after the terminations. I want her to see that we're serious about cultural change. As I prepared to leave for Sterling Financial, I caught my reflection in the boardroom's polished table. The woman looking back was Dr. Elena Rodriguez in full command mode, authoritative, decisive, and absolutely certain of her course of action. In a few hours, Marcus would meet this version of his mother for the first time, though he'd never know it. The irony was perfect. Marcus had spent years dismissing people based on their appearances, their backgrounds, and his own prejudices about success and failure. Today, he would be judged by someone he'd written off as inferior, using standards he'd claimed to embrace, but never actually met. I gathered my files and headed for the elevator, already mentally preparing for the most difficult professional decision of my career. In 3 hours, I would walk into Sterling Financial as the parent company's CEO and personally terminate my own son's employment. He would finally learn what it felt like to be on the receiving end of corporate judgment. But first, I had one more transformation to make. Elena Martinez needed to disappear completely, replaced by the executive who would deliver the consequences Marcus had earned through his own actions. After all, he'd always insisted that some people were built for success while others were destined to fail. Today, he would discover which category he truly belonged in, when success was measured by merit rather than maternal protection. At exactly 1:45 p.m., I walked through the marble lobby of Sterling Financial for the first time as Dr. Elena Rodriguez, CEO of Apex Holdings. The transformation from Elena Martinez was complete. Gone was the modest department store dress, replaced by a charcoal Armani suit that cost more than Marcus thought his mother made in 3 months. My hair was styled in the sleek executive bob I maintained for board meetings, and the confident click of my Louboutin heels announced my arrival to every employee in the vicinity. The security guard at the front desk did a double-take as I approached. "Dr. Rodriguez from Apex Holdings," I announced, producing the executive credentials that would grant me access to every floor of the building. "I'm here for the 2 p.m. management review." His eyes widened as he processed my identity. Word of the parent company CEO's unannounced visit would spread through the building within minutes, exactly as I'd planned. By the time I reached the executive floor, Marcus and his colleagues would know something significant was happening, though they wouldn't understand what until it was too late. Sarah met me at the elevator with a tablet and a grim expression. "Security has been briefed, legal documentation is ready, and the conference room is prepared. Marcus arrived 20 minutes ago. He seems nervous." I smiled coldly. "He should be." The elevator ride to the 38th floor felt both endless and too brief. In minutes, I would face my son not as his embarrassing mother, but as the ultimate authority over his professional fate. The woman he'd dismissed on Friday night was about to reveal herself as the architect of his downfall. "Dr. Rodriguez," greeted Jennifer Walsh, Sterling's CFO, as I stepped off the elevator. Her expression was carefully professional, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. "We're honored by your visit. Should I gather the senior team?" "That won't be necessary," I replied smoothly. "I'll be conducting individual meetings this afternoon. We'll start with Marcus Martinez." Jennifer's eyebrows rose slightly at my decision to begin with a senior VP rather than the president or other C-suite executives, but she simply nodded. "Of course. Shall I escort you to his office?" "Conference room A will be fine. Have Mr. Martinez report there immediately." As Jennifer hurried away to deliver my message, I settled into the conference room that would serve as the stage for Marcus's professional execution. Through the glass walls, I could see Sterling employees throughout the floor, their conversations animated as word spread that the parent company's CEO was conducting surprise evaluations. At exactly 2:00 p.m., Marcus appeared in the doorway, straightening his tie nervously. He looked exactly as he had at his promotion party, confident, entitled, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. When his eyes met mine, confusion flickered across his features. "Dr. Rodriguez?" he said hesitantly, stepping into the room. "I'm Marcus Martinez, Senior Vice President of Corporate Development. I believe there might be some confusion. I was told you wanted to see me, but I think you might be looking for my mother. She has the same last name, and she was here for an interview last week." I let him continue for several more seconds, watching him tie himself in knots trying to explain why the parent company CEO would want to meet with him. Finally, I raised a hand to silence him. "Please, sit down, Mr. Martinez." Marcus settled into the chair across from me, his confusion deepening as I pulled out a thick folder with his name on it. "I apologize, Dr. Rodriguez, but I'm not sure why. You'd want to meet with me specifically. Shouldn't this go through Mr. Patterson or Ms. Walsh?" "This meeting is specifically about your performance, Mr. Martinez. Your department's performance, to be precise." The confidence drained from his face as I opened the folder and began reading from his personnel file. "Senior Vice President, Corporate Development. Promoted 8 months ago based on supposedly exceptional achievements in client acquisition and strategic planning. Performance bonus of $50,000 for the Hartwell Industries deal. Recognition for innovative approach to the Meridian Properties acquisition." Marcus nodded eagerly, his relief obvious. "Yes, that's right. It's been an incredible year for our team. I've implemented several new strategies that have significantly improved our client relationships and deal closure rates." I looked up from the file, meeting his eyes directly. "Tell me about the Hartwell strategy." "Well," Marcus began, leaning forward with renewed confidence, "I identified an opportunity to restructure their debt obligations in conjunction with an equity partnership that would give us preferred positioning for future." I held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "That's interesting, because according to our records, that exact strategy was developed by David Kim, your former junior analyst. Would you like to explain how his work ended up being presented under your name?" The color drained from Marcus's face. I'm not sure what you mean. All strategies developed by my team are collaborative efforts. I provide oversight and guidance. Mr. Kim's initial proposal was submitted 6 weeks before your presentation to the Hartwell board, I continued, pulling out printed emails from the folder. These are his original documents, complete with timestamps and revision history. Your contribution appears to have been changing the font and adding your name to the title page. Marcus's mouth opened and closed silently as he stared at the evidence of his fraud. I could see the exact moment he realized the depth of the investigation that had been conducted into his activities. "Dr. Rodriguez, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Has there?" I pulled out another set of documents, Because we have similar documentation for the Meridian Properties deal, the Chen Industries acquisition, and 7 other projects where you claimed credit for work performed by your subordinates. The conference room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of normal business operations continuing outside. Marcus stared at the evidence spread before him, his professional facade crumbling as he realized the impossibility of explaining away documented proof of his misconduct. Beyond the plagiarism, I continued relentlessly, we have concerning data about your management style. 12 employees have left your department in 18 months, a 67% turnover rate. Would you like to explain why talented individuals keep fleeing your leadership? People leave for all kinds of reasons, Marcus said weakly. Career advancement, better opportunities, personal issues. I pulled out the exit interview summaries, the ones that had made the board members visibly uncomfortable during our morning meeting. According to these interviews, they left because of systematic harassment, discrimination, and workplace hostility. One employee described your management style as deliberately cruel. Another said you created an environment where intelligence was punished and conformity rewarded. Marcus's face had gone completely white. Dr. Rodriguez, I don't know what these people told you, but they told us the truth, Mr. Martinez. They told us about being mocked for their backgrounds, having their ideas stolen, being excluded from meetings and opportunities because they didn't fit your definition of corporate culture. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. They told us about a manager who confused cruelty with leadership and bullying with strength. The silence stretched between us, filled with 30 years of complicated history that Marcus couldn't begin to understand. Finally, I delivered the words that would end his career at Sterling Financial. Marcus Martinez, your employment with Sterling Financial is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building after you've gathered your personal belongings. The shock on his face was complete and devastating. You can't... I want to speak to Mr. Patterson. I want to call my lawyer. This is completely unfair. Unfair? I stood up, my voice taking on the steel that had built Apex Holdings into a financial empire. Mr. Martinez, you've spent 18 months systematically destroying the careers of talented individuals who had the misfortune to work under your supervision. You've stolen credit for their innovations while driving them out of the company through deliberate cruelty. You've damaged client relationships, destroyed team morale, and created legal liability that could have cost this company millions of dollars. Marcus stumbled to his feet, his face flushed with desperation and growing anger. This is insane. I've done nothing wrong. I've been successful here. I've earned everything I've achieved. Have you? I pulled out one final document, the client feedback reports that had been hidden from Sterling's standard review process. Because according to actual client evaluations, you're considered unprepared, condescending, and lacking in strategic insight. Multiple clients have specifically requested alternative representatives after meetings with you. I watched my son process this information, seeing the exact moment he realized that his entire professional identity had been built on lies and stolen achievements. The confident executive who had dismissed his mother as an embarrassment was revealed as a fraud whose success existed only in his own imagination. Dr. Rodriguez, he said desperately, surely we can work something out. I can improve. I can change my management style. I'll make amends to the employees who felt mistreated. The time for amends was before you destroyed their careers, I replied coldly. Your termination is effective immediately and non-negotiable. As if summoned by my words, 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Marcus looked between them. And me, the reality of his situation finally sinking in completely. This isn't over, he said, his voice shaking with a mixture of humiliation and rage. I'll fight this. I'll sue for wrongful termination. I'll expose whatever vendetta you have against me. I gathered my files calmly, maintaining the professional demeanor that had served me well in dozens of similar confrontations. Mr. Martinez, You were terminated for documented cause based on extensive evidence of misconduct and performance failures. I suggest you consult with an employment attorney before making any rash decisions about litigation. As security escorted Marcus toward his office to collect his belongings, I allowed myself a moment of profound sadness. The entitled, cruel man being led away bore little resemblance to the child I'd raised, the son I'd loved unconditionally for 28 years. But he was also the man who had chosen to build his success on the suffering of others, who had confused privilege with merit and cruelty with strength. My phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus, sent from his personal phone as security supervised his office cleaning. Mom, something terrible has happened at work. I need your help. Can you come pick me up? I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Elena Martinez, the struggling mother who would drop everything to help her son, no longer existed. In her place stood Dr. Elena Rodriguez, CEO of Apex Holdings, who had just terminated an employee for cause based on documented misconduct. The rest of the afternoon unfolded with the precision I'd planned. Jennifer Park's interview went brilliantly. She would be returning to Sterling as Director of Strategic Development, the position Marcus had held without earning. David Kim and Maria Santos had both accepted offers to return as well, bringing their talents back to an environment that would finally value their contributions. The all-hands meeting at 4 p.m. was cathartic. As I addressed Sterling's remaining employees about our new standards for leadership and accountability, I saw hope returning to faces that had been worn down by months of toxic management. The culture of fear and intimidation that Marcus and his allies had created would be replaced by something better, something worthy of the talented people who had endured it for too long. By 6 p.m., Sterling Financial had been transformed. 5 toxic executives had been removed, 3 brilliant employees had been hired back, and a clear message had been sent about Apex Holdings' values and expectations. As I prepared to leave the building, Sarah approached with a final update. Marcus left about an hour ago. Security said he kept asking them if they knew why the CEO had personally handled his termination, but they couldn't provide any information. I nodded, gathering my briefcase and preparing for the drive back to Apex Holdings. Tomorrow, Marcus would wake up unemployed, his professional reputation in ruins, his carefully constructed identity as a successful executive revealed as an elaborate fraud. He would probably spend the day making phone calls, trying to understand how his world had collapsed so completely and so quickly. But he would make those calls as the son of Elena Martinez, the woman he'd been embarrassed to acknowledge at his promotion party. He would never know that his downfall had been orchestrated by the same person he'd dismissed as a failure. Never understand that his embarrassing mother was actually one of the most powerful executives on Wall Street. As my car pulled away from Sterling Financial, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and melancholy. Justice had been served, toxic leadership had been removed, and talented employees would finally receive the recognition they deserved. But I'd also lost my son, not to death or distance, but to the entitled cruelty he'd chosen over the values I'd tried to instill. My phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. Mom, I really need to talk to you. Everything is falling apart. This time, I didn't delete the message immediately. Instead, I saved it as a reminder of the most important lesson I'd learned from this entire experience. Sometimes the greatest act of love is allowing someone to face the full consequences of their choices, even when that someone is your own child. After all, Marcus had always insisted that some people were built for success, while others were destined to fail. Today, he'd finally discovered which category he belonged in when success was measured by character rather than connections, by merit rather than manipulation. The embarrassing mother he'd dismissed had taught him the most valuable lesson of his life. In the real world, kindness matters more than cruelty. Integrity matters more than image. And true success is built on lifting others up rather than tearing them down. He just didn't know his teacher's real name. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.